Episode of No One Dies from Divorce podcast. My name is Jill Coyle, and I love being here with you every week to give you all the information you need to not only survive, but thrive through divorce. And you know me, I love to get fun, entertaining guests on the show. And that is exactly what I have today. Jahan, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Jahan, you are hailing clear over from Australia. Is that correct?
That's right. I hail from sunny Sydney, in Australia. Yeah,
That's amazing. How's the weather over there?
it's beautiful. We've just come into spring, so I think we're in the 7th or 8th day of spring, and it's just glorious.
Oh, I can't wait. We actually have a trip to Australia planned for 2024. We had my dream vacation to Australia planned in 2020, March of 2020, and you can kind of guess what happened. And I'm not even joking. The day before we were supposed to fly out, our cruise got canceled, and it was sad. But it is what
Well,
it
you
is.
know what? It's only getting better with age, and now you know me. So when you come, I'll make you a barbecue.
Oh, I love it. So let me all introduce my listeners to you. So Jahan is a Sydney-based solicitor, university lecturer, and entrepreneur who describes himself as a little guy lawyer. He attributes his human rights leanings to his proud Persian heritage, a dislike of bullies, and a genuine belief that one person can make a difference. Leaving a successful career in finance in order to pursue law, he was admitted to the NSW Bar Association at the age of 25. Subsequently, he established and became a partner of the firm of Executive League, where he heads up the serious crime and mental health practice. Jahan's keynote and work focuses primarily on the skills and expertise developed while working in the law and how to tailor your communication for the audience. His work was recognized by TEDx Sydney, who invited him to speak in 2018 on the main stage. So welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So tell me then a little bit of your journey, because it's a little unorthodox about you kind of coming into law.
Sure. I grew up in Sydney. My background's Iranian or Persian, and one of the things that was sort of expected when you got good marks at high school was that you'd go to university. And when you don't know what you're going to do, because there's a lot of options, I thought, oh, finance, it'd be nice to make some money and, be able to be financially free. So I went and worked for various banks and investment funds, etc. And I hated it. It was just not me. And even though I had a degree in it, I absolutely disliked it. And so I was kind of lucky that the GFC happened, because when the GFC happened, all of a sudden, a lot of the incentive, which was money, was stripped away. And without the incentive, I was like, well, this really isn't feeding my soul. I'm going to go and try to find something more stable. And so I'd always had an interest in law. And so I kind of decided I'll go to night school and I will practice probably in the financial sector when I graduate. So I did, graduated from night school, went into practice, and I had no work from anyone in the financial sector. So here in Australia, we have a split bar. I think you guys are solicitors and barristers simultaneously. We have solicitors who do pretty much stuff outside of court work, and we've got barristers who only do court work and advice work. And we have kind of this weird amalgam called solicitor advocates, which is what I am, which is you will do most of the court work yourself, but still some things go to barristers. And so when I established my practice, no one would hire me, because the reality is, who wants a 25-year-old barrister for a bank? Banks have unlimited money. They don't want to take a shot on a new kid. And so I just sort of was like, well, what am I going to do? And I had some friends who'd gone into legal aid and the pro bono sector, and they were like, look, you're pretty good. Can we give you some work? And I started doing these really basic criminal cases, family law cases, small time stuff in rural courts. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with advocacy. I fell in love with helping people. And it really ignited in me a powerful ethos that it's good to give back. And so I did that for 4 years before deciding I think I'm going to establish a practice. And I started a firm that was Executive Legal, now Executive Law Group. And we fundamentally work for the little guy. So that means that most, if not all, of my clients have a face, they have a story, they're not a big corporation. I sometimes act for corporations, but it's usually the smaller corporation kind of having it out with the bigger corporation. And that's sort of the ethos that I've got. And I've been in practice now I think, almost a decade, which sounds really
Uh-huh.
scary to say out loud. But I love it. I love it so much. I think the law is a big, big space, and there's something for everyone.
That's amazing. One of the things that I know is that family law is not, that's what I do primarily here in the States is, divorces and custody. And, if you're not in the right space of what you're doing, like helping people through the most trying time of your life, it becomes like the hardest kind of law. So I'm totally with you. Like the attitude makes the practice. And like, if you do, take your passion and make it your profession, like you will end up loving going to work every day. So
Well, my practice is mixed between family and crime, and my partner does commercial and employment. And family law is by far way harder than crime and way, way more stressful. There is a reason that in Australia, the only courts that have ever been targeted by assassins and bombings are family courts. And it's because somebody else summarized it far better than me, but in criminal law, you have people who may be bad on their best behavior, but in family law, you've got good people on their worst behavior. And you see it every day. Every single day, I'll get some snippy letter. The child arrived dirty. We will not be giving them to you. And it's like, well, the kid was at soccer practice. Like, it's 4 p.m. Handovers at 5. Like, why do you have to behave like this? So practitioners in our space can also be quite nasty, I found, at least in Australia.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Like family law has the best and the worst attorneys. The best attorneys are the ones that are doing it for the right reasons. The worst attorneys are because they think it brings in a paycheck. And I absolutely agree with that. So what would you categorize your percentages? You do 50-50 about, or?
So it's really 30% crime, 30% family, 40% other litigation. So my speciality is generally I run motions. So I will do you guys call them motions in limine, I think, or something like that. So, but fundamentally what I do is, for example, if the argument is, can we exclude the evidence of police officer X, I'll run that up. The whole trial, though, I'll give that usually to a barrister. Similar with family law, we have interim and final hearings, and generally we'll have little steps along the way. I'll do some of the more junior steps along the way and leave the bigger steps to other colleagues.
So tell me, so do you have barristers then within your firm?
No, so they're independent of our firm. So the firm is so there's partners here, and then we have associates underneath. And what happens is we have an independent bar that we engage or instruct for specific matters. And so what will happen is if it's a relatively technical matter or we need specific advice, we go to barristers and say, hey, can you assist us with this?
Yeah, that makes sense. But could you bring in a barrister into your firm?
No,
that
they're separate from, and the reason for that is actually quite logical. It's to maintain independence. It's so that they can tell the clients the things you can't tell them. And it's so that if, for example, you become a witness in a case, the barrister can still continue, which sometimes happens. It does happen sometimes that somebody will make an allegation or do something, and then all of a sudden you're conflicted out, but your barrister isn't. And so there's a few logical reasons for it.
That's interesting, because obviously here we can do it all from the start all the way to the end. And so I kind of want to know, like, does it increase cost, do you think, to have to transfer firms? Yeah. Because that would be really hard to like catch the barrister up to everything you've done on the underlining and make sure they're on the same page and then get prepared to take your case to trial.
That's right. So you guys have trial attorneys, right? That just specialize in trials. Is that the case?
Well, it's like I consider myself a trial attorney. Like I will take a divorce from the day that we file, and I will take it all the way to trial in front of the judge if it needs to be. So I would consider myself a trial attorney, but I do everything in between as well.
So I do everything in between, and the last step I give to the barrister. Alternatively, sometimes I do run the last step myself if it's not particularly complex. But if it's family law is hyper regulated in Australia, as I'm sure it is in your jurisdiction as well. And it's really, it breaks my heart because you've got good people interfacing with the law who've never interfaced with the law before, and they're brought into an emotionally stressful time and a highly complicated legal framework. So there's like really complex legal principles that they need to understand. And they were like, well, that's not fair. And it's like, yeah, I know it's not fair, but that's the law. So it does get challenging, but you're right. It does add considerable expense.
Interesting. This is why. So this is how I guess in full circle, how I got to know you a little bit is that you became kind of infamous on TikTok. Um, your handle is just your name.
Jahan Kalantar official, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. Like what led you to kind of go on the website, and then how did you kind of blow up?
So yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I here in Australia, we had very severe lockdowns that took place during the whole pandemic.
Yeah.
Really severe ones, to the extent you weren't allowed, if you left your house, you could only go 5 kilometers, and the rules were quite gray. So as a trial lawyer, as a firm, 13, 14 staff, 7-figure revenue, all of a sudden, overnight, we went to 0 revenue. And it was really scary. It's really, really scary because you've got families depending on you, and you've got clients depending on you, calling you, is my case going to proceed? Is it not? But you couldn't tell them anything. And so our government took the approach of doing these press conferences every day where they would try to explain the situation. They did a horrific job. They were completely unclear. They were totally divisive. They would use these terms like singles bubble and LGAs of concern that no one understood. And thankfully, my home was 4.8 kilometers from my office.
Okay.
So I was within the 5K radius. So I'd go to my office and I'd sit there. I was like, I've got nothing to do. So I'd research what the government said, and I just explained it in plain English. Hey, I'm a lawyer. This is what I think it means. And so it kind of like bubbled along. And the thing about TikTok or any social media is it's definitely not linear. You will have days where nothing will happen, or you'll even go backwards. And then suddenly you'll do something that resonates and connects, and then boom, it goes explosive. So I had about 90,000 people following me before Johnny Depp and Amber Heard began their divorce case. And the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case was fascinating to me as an Australian and as a litigator, because it had everything. You never see a trial of this scope play out in real time. You never do. They always settle, or they're done in closed court. So to see it in real time and to have 2 individuals that are famous was really interesting. And so what I started to do was comment each relatively quickly after a section would happen. So for example, there'd be the cross-examination of Ms. Heard, and I'd say, okay, Ms. Vasquez said this, this, and this because I believe she was trying to do this technique called closing the gate, or what have you. And there'd be an argument. I'd say, okay, Mr. Chu said this, or Ms. Bredehoff said this. And I think in explaining the law in plain English, because the art form of law is not to make the complex more complex, it's to make the complex seem simple while appreciating how complex it is. And so that kind of led to me getting a bit of traction. And so I kind of gained a following in the United States and the United Kingdom, which I didn't have previously. So that sort of led to me, I guess, blowing up and sort of analyzing things with the lawyer's perspective. There was a lot of stuff said that was, I mean, we can both agree that neither of those 2 people are angels, and it was a really toxic relationship filled with heaps of interpartner violence, and that the narrative that was put by both sides is probably incorrect, and that their truth lies somewhere in the middle. But it was fascinating to watch. And so because I'm a nerd, I sat down with the Virginia trial rules. I read through them. I read through the appellate book. I read through all the bits and pieces. And even though the language is a little different, it's sort of the same. So I could kind of articulate why what was happening was happening.
Right, right. And that's how I came across you, because I was already doing videos on TikTok and on Instagram, and nobody cared about him, and it was just what it was. But then my take on Johnny Depp just like overnight just blew up. And what was going to happen. And then I just started talking about it, just like you, giving a legal perspective of it, not any real judgment, but letting people know this is what I think from a legal take. And I think people appreciated that. And I love watching your TikToks because you break them down very, very eloquently. And what I thought was crazy, Jahan, is that you are in Australia, but yeah, I felt like a lot of times you just nailed it on the head with what the American courts were doing. And it was really fun to watch you. So I wanted to kind of nerd out a little bit and talk about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, because even though we've talked about it so much and I'm kind of over it, and I'm sure you're a little bit over it as well, it's not ending. Like, it's still going to be going forward. We're still going to have these people in the news. So I kind of wanted to just kind of get your like overall take. Like, did you kind of predict that the ending of this trial would have happened the way that it happened?
When it began, no, I didn't. You guys have such strong freedom of speech laws in the United States. and defamation is such a high bar that has to be reached that I thought it wouldn't succeed. When it flipped for me was when I saw a video outside the courtroom of people screaming, Johnny Depp, 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 going crazy. And then I realized that perception, because we never saw the jurors, you can never predict what jurors are doing, but that perception was so powerful in the zeitgeist that I thought, okay, they've overcome those barriers.
Yeah.
And so it was then that I guess I made my prediction the day before and it was right. But up until maybe 3 days before, I would have said, no, Miss Heard, it'll be dismissed. And it would, and I've always known it's going to go to the Virginia Appellate Court, and Virginian Appellate Court is going to say, why is it here? You know, because getting it in that jurisdiction was also a work of magic, you know, that two actors from California are having an argument about a Washington Post article. The reason they get it in Virginia is because that's where the Washington Post keeps its servers. So brilliant forum shopping, legal strategy by Mr. Depp's team. Like brilliant, really well thought out.
It seems like everything with the legal strategy of Johnny Depp's team was on point. Because one of the things that I talked a lot about is that Johnny Depp did not go into this case thinking he was going to win. I mean, this was an entire play to win back the public opinion and the favor of his fans. And whether he won or not, they completely met that goal of, getting Americans and even I think the UK, because, he had just had, I watched, well, at least what I could, and read a lot about that prior libel case. And then I read the 50-page brief that the judge did in the UK. And when I came out, my prediction was like, there's no way he's going to win this. That the findings in that British UK trial was so pertinent against him. I said, nah, he's not going to win this defamation case. But what turned my opinion of the case was the lies that Amber just could not keep straight. I mean, she was a horrible witness, which, we deal with horrible witnesses all the time. As divorce, everybody lies. It's just a matter of fact. But when she got on that stand and she was testifying in this narrative, I'm this victim, and then there was no ability for her to take any accountability of anything. That's when I thought, these jurors hate her.
I think you're right. I mean, this has always been a public relations strategy disguised as a lawsuit. That's what this is. There was never an intention to win. It was only to curry back the favor he may have lost. And she was a horrific witness. There is inconsistent testimony from day to day, staring down the jury in a strange, bizarre manner that was very unsettling, even for me watching via camera, mimicking Johnny's outfit. Now, I didn't notice that till day 5. But there's 12 jurors. You're telling me one of them isn't going to be eagle-eyed enough to notice that this behavior is. And what I loved is that Dr. Curry's testimony, who was Johnny's expert witness in relation to the in relation to her histrionic personality disorder, to a T said she has this, and this, and this. And then she went to exhibit every single behavior that Dr. Curry opined that she had. And you compare and contrast that. I mean, that to me, Dr. Curry was the star of the trial. Yes. No question. And you contrast. I mean, it was almost shambolic the way Miss Heard's team ran it versus they were so methodical, logical. Everything was thought out. There was that doctor, Spiegel. He might be very accomplished, but his behavior on the stand was very disconcerting.
Oh, yeah.
Very disconcerting. Like, keep him away. I mean, we have expert witnesses that should never be put in front of a camera. Keep it that way. But, and he wrote an op-ed piece later on saying, like, I have experienced this horrific backlash. And I'm like, mate, this is the biggest trial of this generation. If you're not going to show up prepared, that's on you, and you should suffer some backlash.
Yeah.
Sorry. You're going to play, you're going to play in the big leagues. You're going to suffer the big league consequence.
Well, and that's the whole purpose of an expert witness. We are paying you lots of money to come to court to help my case. And he did nothing but hurt their credibility, just everything. If I was a juror, I wouldn't have taken a single thing he said as anything that would help me in this case.
I would actually think that they have engaged someone so bad that I can't have faith in any of the other witnesses. Because, jurors don't think, I always say jurors will accept one coincidence. They will possibly extend to two. They won't extend to three. And there were good witnesses for Ms. Heard that were totally destroyed because of this. For example, I think that witness that came in and showed the data of the hatred she'd received and those various bits of paper. I actually think that was a good witness. I think I don't remember his name, but looking at the metadata and giving, it was actually a good witness. But after Spiegel, I was so done with anything they had to say. I was like, well, I don't like Ms. Heard. I don't believe what she has to say. Things that she's saying are directly being rebutted by witnesses that have come to court, like Kate Moss, like the guy from Hicksville, and rather
the TMZ guy.
The TMZ guy, Morgan Tremaine, he was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and he just shut down. I mean, he was the one who everybody was like, you're hoping Amber Heard's just not up there lying, but he was the one where I was like, she is just lying. And he just caught her in that. But what I also thought was crazy about this case is she kept saying that she had been abused so many times, so many ways, to the point of having black eyes and blah, blah, blah. And she could never lay foundation other than a very few simple times. And the only person that could come to corroborate any of the abuse was her sister, who had already been proven to commit perjury. I was like, what? Why are we here? This is the worst case you could have put on.
Well, that's right. So for example, she would say, oh, I was beaten savagely. It was horrific. And then you would read Dr. Kapoor's report, and it would say something, Dr. Kipper, I think, and Dr. Kipper would say something along the lines of, no visible marks. And then, you compare and contrast. Johnny's case was, she hits me, and he gave one example, which is the finger, and he had everything to back up that. And if I was running Ms. Heard's case, I would have focused on Johnny. Johnny was abusive in general. I mean, those photos of destroying that hotel room in Australia on his bender, that's a powerful case. Stick to that. Don't make up these lies that are then disproved, because your credibility is gone. Yeah. And so if it's this extensive, it's unfathomable to you and I. We know people who are the genuine victims of abuse. I work with a lot of domestic violence survivors, and I work with people who are subjected to severe trauma, and it's offensive to me. It's really genuinely offensive to me that she said that her situation and their situation was the same. It's not. It's not, and it's not right to do that, because you're cheapening what those poor women and those poor men go through, because domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It can be men, women, people of all orientations, and people of all genders. But by what she was trying to do is hold herself up as this paragon of, I've been through hell. And it was a bad, toxic relationship, and you should have stuck to that. This was a toxic relationship. He brought out the worst in me. I brought out the worst in him, but I never, ever, ever, everything I said in that article was basically true. That's what she needed to do. She didn't do that.
And in United States specifically, domestic violence does not necessarily mean he punched me in the face. I got a lot of backlash on a video I did where I said Johnny did commit domestic violence when he threw that glass in front of her, when he's threatening to cut his wrist. That is a form of abuse. And in, America could be grounds for the protective order and, possibly her saying that she was a survivor of domestic violence. But her going so far to say that he punched her and he pushed her downstairs and, did all of this horrible stuff, that's where she got wrong, because I absolutely agree with you. She should have just focused on the fact that he did those specific things that she could prove, versus creating this narrative that there was no proof behind.
That's right. In Australia, we also recognize coercion and control as being part of domestic violence and interpersonal family violence. So, for example, threatening someone, isolating them financially, doing all these bits and pieces absolutely forms domestic violence. It doesn't necessarily need to be physical violence. It can be emotional abuse. It could be, I mean, there was evidence of that. There was oodles of evidence of that. Johnny sending strange messages, being rude, being this. The difference is he owned it. He owned it.
Yeah.
He owned it hard. In the witness box, yes, I did that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. It was a shameful thing to do. I was upset. I was this, I was that. It was a very good mea culpa. Whereas her, nothing was ever her fault. I gave it to my legal team. I told Dr. Kapoor. I told this person. I did this. I did that. And then there were these coincidences that would stack up, because I don't think she recognized that the rest of the world is not naive. And maybe in Hollywood, a bubble's created around you where everything you say, people just accept. Of course, you're beautiful and you're famous and everything else. But, you know, the timing of the protective order and the TMZ being there, we're not idiots.
Yeah.
Why would TMZ hang outside a random Los Angeles County thing? Why would you get out of a limo looking like a dove? It's just ludicrous, right? And it's offensive to the sensibilities of anyone that has even a modicum of intelligence.
I absolutely agree. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your thoughts on the fact that Johnny, on one of his 3 counts of defamation, they actually found against him, but it was specifically for statements his attorney said on his behalf. I kind of wanted to talk to you because you're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. I was shocked in a couple ways. First of all, because his lawyer said that. And so it was almost like the defamation should have come like a direct suit to the lawyer versus like a conduit of Johnny Depp. But I wanted to hear your thoughts. Like what was kind of your opinion?
So this is the area of the law that I found the most technically difficult to unravel. I was trying to speak. I'm one of those nerds. I reached out to various Virginian law firms like, hey, can I talk to you for like 20 minutes? I don't understand this concept that you can hold someone liable for comments they make potentially on your behalf, because in Australia, you can, but it has to be a publisher. For example, a publisher makes comments on behalf of a journalist and they can be held liable. The concept exists. And when Mr. Waldman gave evidence, he was instructed not to answer questions on privilege, and he did that, and that's his right, and that's the right of his client. And I don't think Johnny disputed that he gave instructions to Mr. Waldman to make those claims. I don't understand how it works. I think it's a quirk of Virginian defamation law. That is, I mean, Virginia's got some pretty strong defamation laws in the sense that there's, SLAPP lawsuits are, which is strategic litigation against public participation, which is if you sue someone just to shut them up, those are banned in certain places. Virginia, they're not, or the other way around, vice versa. And so I think that was the element of I found the most technically challenging. But yeah, I was surprised as well that the jury found in that favor, particularly given the clean sweep they gave him across everything else.
Well, and it almost was like the jury was adamant to not hurt Johnny.
Yeah. Because
they didn't understand the technical issue with it as well, because in the end, it did hurt Johnny. And then I just wanted your opinion, because I actually haven't talked about this a little bit, but my first thing was, oh my gosh, Waldman committed malpractice, and this is going to be a malpractice issue. But then I was like, we go to court all the time and speak on behalf of our clients, not knowing if it's true or false. Well, it's not my job to find out what you're telling me is the truth, right? So we go and we spew our clients' lies and half-truths because that's our job. We advocate. So I was like, wait, if this is something that is upheld, does this open the door for lawyers to be sued if we say something that's found to be not true because our client told us?
Well, remember, our obligation as advocates, and it's different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In my jurisdiction, I can't say anything unless I have a good faith basis. My client's instructions to me are good faith basis. My client tells me they said that, I can put that forward. The judge and the jury may not accept that what my client is saying is credible. They may not accept the truth of the statement proffered, but in fact, I would say it's reverse. It's malpractice if we go to court and we don't say what our clients tell us to say, and we don't put forward their case in the light that they have instructed us to do so. It's not uncommon in my practice where I go, look, what you're telling me is really, really unbelievable, but I'm not God. I'm not omniscient. And if you tell me that's the case, I will do it, but you're going to have to sign this document.
Yeah.
All right. And you put it in front of them, and 8 times out of 10, they go, yeah, look, maybe we should do a different strategy. And 2 times out of 10, they sign it. And I say, I put forward, and the judge looks at me like I'm, a fool, and goes, why would you say that? And I say, I have a good faith basis, Your Honor.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what we do. We have them sign their own financial declaration. We have them sign their own declaration that we submit to court, which is their testimony. And I was like, my client said it, they signed off on it. And you're right, it takes a little bit, but that's just where I kind of got to this point of like, that's weird. Because he was just speaking on behalf. And then I had the problem of why did the jury get to that point where they believe that what Waldman said actually hurt Amber? I mean, the ball was already rolling. So I was a little bit confused. I honestly, if I was going to make a prediction about the appellate court, I would not be surprised if they find an abuse of discretion or they find something wrong on that piece of it and they remand it back to court. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's probably right. I think, look, Judge Ascanate was fantastic. That was one of the most well-run trials I've ever seen. And what a credit to the judiciary to have a person of that integrity and that skill. Time, everything was fair. You get as much time as the other side. Don't waste it. Don't stuff around. This is what you do. The questions posed to the jury in the end in a systemic list to allow them to think the questions through. The careful consideration of motion. I mean, we're lawyers. Sometimes the general public go, oh my God, that, seeking to dismiss it straight away. It's like, no, well, you have to do that to preserve your appeal rights. And generally speaking, it was just a well-run trial, because that trial had every capacity to turn into a circus, and it didn't. It really didn't. And so it was, in my opinion, certainly one of the best run trials I've ever seen.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Everything I know about Australian law came from me watching the show Rake.
It's one of my favorites.
It is the best. It is one of the best legal shows of all time. So I absolutely loved it. And I was sad when they ended it. So
to think of it, I'm Barnyard and he's Cleaver. The barrister's a Cleaver, I'm Barnyard. The well-meaning bumbling solicitor, that's me.
That is awesome. I love that. Well, I know you have to run to court, but I just wanted to kind of hear last thoughts. You are doing a lot of legal TikTok. That's kind of what you do. You break things down very, very well. I love it. Just tell people real quick, if they want to get more information about you, where can they find you?
So it's my name, Jahan Kalantar official. Good story about that is when I started my TikTok, I told my beloved I've started this thing called TikTok. And my name is Jahan Kalantar official. And she goes, oh, really? So you think you're going to be a big star on TikTok, are you? And then everything I do something, I'd like pour myself a tea. She goes, are you doing that officially? And then I started getting copycats. And then I was like, so maybe I'll need a divorce attorney before I know it, given the way that I'm carrying on. But Jahan Kalantar official. I also have a YouTube channel on Instagram. And, please reach out to me. Love to connect with people. Love connecting with amazing legal influencers like yourself, Jill. I love what you're doing. I love the stuff that you're doing around demystifying things, like the Sylvester Stallone divorce. I had no idea. You gave me a lot of good insights on that. So I'm really grateful that there's this community of people who are sort of subject matter experts, but are also kind of bringing humanity to law, because law from the outside really does look like a whitewashed Anglo-Saxon heteronormative male-dominated system. And by kind of showing people that no, there's a whole bunch of us that are not that, and we're all sorts of different different races, different across the world, it's fascinating. And so I'm really enjoying that TikTok creates and Instagram and these social medias create these spaces for these chats.
I love it too. And I know that our listeners really appreciate it. So that's why I keep doing it. And if you ever want to do like a TikTok live or an Instagram live, I would love it. It would be really fun. And I think we'd get a lot of interesting questions and we could have a lot of fun. So
100%. I was going to suggest we do a YouTube live. Because
I would love it.
YouTube's because are you on YouTube?
I am on YouTube. It's not where majority of my followers are, but I am building my
I think YouTube's the future because the long form content really works well. And I did a great one with Legal Mindset. He's fantastic. He's an American attorney who practices in Korea, I think. He's a lovely dude. Yeah, and so yeah, let's do that. I'd love to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. We love all that celebrity gossip, and I bring it to you on my Instagram and on my TikTok. So go follow us because we just give you a lot of fun advice that, is a little bit more entertaining sometimes than the real life divorce and stuff that we have to deal with every day. So thanks, Jahan. Have a good luck in court.
Thank you so much, Jill. So nice to meet you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoyle.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.